Welcome to the Comic Culture Show. I'm your host, Matt. With me, as always, is Nick. Taking another break this week is Mighty Mike Eakins. It's all good, Mike. We love you. And with us this week is the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Waid himself. Mark, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Good evening. My pleasure.
All right. Well, hey, I just want to get right into it. I mean, obviously, there's so many things that we could be talking about given the breadth of your career, but I wanted to talk a little bit about Humanoids to get things going. A lot of people may not be super familiar with Humanoids as a publisher, though. Do you want to talk about them a little bit?
Yeah, let me give you a little bit of background. They're right. It's not terribly well known in the States, but Humanoids has been one of the most respected publishers of graphic novels in Europe for decades and decades. They do a lot of work with Alejandro Dorowski, a lot of work with Mobius. Their biggest graphic novel is The Ink Owl, which even non-superhero guys have heard of, even superhero fans have heard of, by Mobius and Jodorowsky. The Techno Priest's also a big thing with a big franchise for us here by Jodorowsky, and just a plethora of other things. So they were a European publisher, like I said, have been a European publisher for decades. A few years ago, they decided they wanted to break into the American market, and I came on board a couple of years ago as a consultant just because I knew the market, and had done every job there is to do in comics. So I was, I felt like I had something to bring to the table, help them out, launch a few things. Some things went well, some things not so well, but we're learning our way. And then in March of last year, I guess it's time has no meaning anymore. March of last year, I was asked to be the publisher. I took the job. Then a week later, the pandemic struck, and I've been scrambling to put fires out ever since, but it's going okay.
What a time to be alive.
Man alive.
Nick, go ahead.
That's just so interesting, really, because it's what a time for the comic industry, especially.
It's partly my fault because the first day I took the job, this is true, the very first day I took the job, the assistant editor announced that she was leaving to move to France. The second day, we lost about 40% of our entire backstock in a freak accident with a tornado in Tennessee and a shipping truck. And so by day 3, I sat down with the staff and I said, look, I'm new, I'm your new publisher. I just wanted to let you know that I've seen every problem there is to have in comics. I've seen every single disaster that could possibly happen. I've lived through it all. And in fact, I kind of look forward to you bringing me a new problem that I've never seen before. And then like 24 hours later, we shut the office. So that's where we've been. So I just, like Icarus toward the sun, I flew up all braggy about how I could handle anything. So it's been an interesting year for comics. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, it really has. And just one thing after another, it seems. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the work that Humanoids has done recently? I mean, breaking into the American market, you've got Ignited kicking off a shared universe that dropped in 2019. We were on second volume. What is it like kind of differentiating the work that you've got in so many decades in the European market and coming over to the Western market and trying to approach it in that manner?
Well, what I like is the fearlessness with which these guys approach the market. The remit for the Ignited books, basically these were books that were created before I got there by a council of creators like Kwanzaa Oyefo and Carlos P. McNeil and Yannick Paquette, sort of people like that getting together and brainstorming up a new universe of characters, not exactly superheroes because they don't wear costumes, there's no spandex, there's no capes, but the conceit is that something's happening on the planet Earth, something weird and unexplained, and people are just erupting with superpowers all over the world. And so we launched a line of 3 books out of that, the Ignited universe. I took the first one with Kwanzaa, and it was called Ignited. It was about 6 kids who had gone through the trauma of a school shooting, and now were suddenly empowered to be able to do something about it and fight back against a world that lets this kind of crap happen. There was another book called Strange Lands that was about a young couple who met cute, and then that same night they were in a horrible accident and they both got superpowers, but now they're wanted by the law because they're blamed for the accident. And then the third one, which was actually our strongest property, Omni, which Devin Grayson helped launch, and then went to Melody Cooper, who's a really strong TV writer, movie talent, really good writer, about a black doctor named Cecilia Kobina, who is suddenly sparked with powers and becomes the smartest human being alive. Her brain is able to race at like nearly light speed. But now she sees this happening all over the world with people interrupting with powers. And so she, as a doctor, she wants to get to the bottom of it and help heal these people, find out what's going on, help them if they need help, and travel the world. And she's turned out to be an amazing character. I mean, again, strong black female lead that really well done. And that's been our, to me, that's been our crown jewel. So the Ignited, the books, the periodicals have since stopped. We shipped the last of them fairly recently. The market, is just not friendly right now to floppy comics. If you're not Marvel and DC, it's just brutal. And rather than keep pumping stuff out there, we thought, what Humanoids has always done well is original graphic novels. And so we need to lean more into that space anyway. Most publishers are. I'm a big fan of floppy comics. I still want them every Wednesday at my store, but I see the merit in leaning more and more into the original graphic novel format, because more and more of our readers, as they enter the market, as the younger readers are entering the market, are gravitating toward that. So those books will continue in some form or another in original graphic novel format. I would be lying if I said they were smash successes. I felt like they were critically well done. And they got really good reviews, but it's, we're still learning. This was our first foray into the American market. So we learned a few things. We learned from what worked. We learned from what didn't. And then we went on to wave 2. And so this starting in, I guess, a couple of months, you'll start seeing a rollout of original graphic novels that are really strong material. None of it's superhero stuff. Some of it's action adventure. Some of it's, slice of life. Some of it's hard science fiction, but it's a really good slate coming up, and it's a little something for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, in looking at that diversification, you've always been a strong proponent, at least to my memory, of finding alternative venues and ways to get graphic media into people's hands. I remember, 12, 13 years ago now, when digital comics were first becoming a thing and everyone was like, oh God, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. You were off there saying, no, this is going to get people reading,
damn right.
People who wouldn't be inclined every Wednesday to buy floppies to buy our shit. And lo and behold.
Yeah. It's, I've always, again, this is part of it is the fact that I've been in comics for 30 something years, and I've seen everything, and I've worked everywhere, and I have this sort of universal field theory about comics, because I've just been able to come at it from so many different angles. And also I get bored. I get tired of doing the same things over and over again, even if they're reasonably successful. And that's not me just as a market, as a industry in general. I've always been the kind of person who would rather fail at being the first person to do something than succeed by being the second person. I don't want to do what everybody else does. I don't want to, I think, win or lose, crash and burn or succeed. I think, history belongs to the people who are first in line and create new things and come up with new stuff. That's why I started the Thrillbent digital site, where we did our digital comics, just sort of in limbo right now as I'm trying to juggle so many different things at so many different times. But I'm really proud of the way we came up with a new way of doing digital comics. Thrillbent.com, visit it now. All comics are free. And always, like you said, always looking for new venues, new ways of getting the material out there, because had we spent my entire adult life, we've spent saying, well, we gotta find a way to get more people to read comics. We gotta find a way to bring more people into the tent. Well, yeah, but guess what? That hasn't worked real well. So here's an idea. Why don't, instead of trying to figure out a way to bring them to us, we need to work harder at getting to them is what we need to do. And, the Marvel and DC are doing a really nice job with their original graphic novel YA stuff that they're putting out for kids and for young adults, because that's where the growth market is, man. That's where the growth market is. That's, kids are reading Raina Telgemeier stuff and Dog Boy, and they're reading it, they're in one day, they'll sell more copies of a Raina Telgemeier book than they will an entire year's worth of Superman comics. And that market's out there. Just because it's not superheroes doesn't mean it's not comics. It just means that that's right. And so the question is, how do we bring superheroes into that market? Trickier than it looks sometimes. But anyway, all this to say, yes, I agree with your statement, which is I like to look for new stuff. That's a long answer to a short question. Yes.
Well, and it's it's important too, because you still, in the year of our Lord 2021, have people out there saying comics are for kids.
Yep.
And it's just mind-boggling.
It's way, as somebody who has the long game view, it is so much better than it was.
Hollywood has helped in that regard.
I wouldn't bring a comic book on an airplane or a bus, until, for the first 30 years of my life. Now you can kind of get away with it. But, and then we did win the Cultural Revolution in that sense. It is a geek nation. But yes, there's still problems. And it's not so much, I don't think the resistance is so much people, comics are for kids. I think the resistance is more like, okay, I like this. Wait, where do I have to go to get this? Oh, I have to go to a special store. Then I only get to buy a little bit of the story every month. Then I have to follow it, and I have to hope I'm there on Wednesday so it doesn't sell out because it's not going to be there next week. That's the friction point. And so that's where, digital's a big help, because buying comics then becomes a pants-free experience. Do it from the comfort of your own home. But even then, it's harder because comicsology is not, and digital comics are not the end all be all, not the savior of everything. Because can you imagine if you've never read comics ever and your first exposure was comicsology? Where would you even start? It'd be like if you've never listened to music and suddenly you just sign on to iTunes. Like, where would you even begin? So that's where stores are great. That's where stores excel, is curating and being, the people who can help you help new readers, bring new readers to the product and that they would be interested in. A good store owner, first thing they'll always ask is, what are you interested in? What kind of TV shows do you watch? What kind of movies do you like? Comicsology doesn't have that option. So that's, there'll always be a place for stores. I feel like I'm all over the place here. I feel like I'm saying saying smart things, but they're not necessarily connecting with each other. Does that just make any sense?
Oh no, it's making sense.
It's hitting home maybe a little too
we
close.
Can have our cake and eat it too.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, because really, a lot of what you're speaking about is kind of me. And not to just date myself here, but I was introduced to comics through digital platforms and Comicsology and Marvel Unlimited 11, 12 years ago. And I lived out in the middle of Texas where there were no comic shops.
There's no comic stores there, yeah.
Yeah, I can't access them, but I could download an app on my tablet. And one of the most intimidating factors was just that question right there. Where do I even start?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that question pushed me to Comic Watch, which eventually pushed me to here, and it snowballs into that. But my finding a comic shop was a huge deal in my path in reading comics.
Yeah, people who live in major metropolitan areas really don't comprehend how lucky they are to have 3 comic stores within driving distance of each other. There are entire states where it's not Colorado. I wouldn't say it's Utah, Nebraska, somewhere up in the in the upper Midwest that has like 1 comic store in the entire state.
Yeah.
This is Mississippi has like 3, and so digital's a great ambassador there. But like you said, I'm glad that you were able to navigate. I'm glad you were able to find stuff and gravitate to stuff that you liked.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the important part. And what helped with that was really not necessarily the endless scrolling through Marvel and DC titles, but it was sort of indie books, kind of like what you see in Humanoids,
Yeah.
that are maybe not, you require 10, 20 years of reading to catch up to it. You can jump right into it.
Right. And there's probably an end to the story. You're probably going to get a big chunk of a complete story. And that's not to run down, Marvel and DC stuff, because that's awesome that these characters have lasted for 70, 80 years and will continue to do so. That's terrific. But, what you miss out of that is you don't get beginning, middle, and end. If you, even if you walk into a comic store now and you say, I want to start reading Batman, I'm not even sure where I would tell you to start. I mean, do you start with Dark Knight? Awesome. It's a great book. But then where do you go from there that is consistent with that? If you like Dark Knight, it doesn't necessarily translate that you're going to like, whatever Tom King is doing right now, because it's a completely different character, completely different look of things. So I don't know. I mean, there's so many problems to solve, but digital, I think, helps solve a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like having that more narrow focus or more defined focus on what these books are and having it in an accessible format is a huge deal. And I noticed that Humanoids has done a great approach with the new book, Space Bastards.
Yeah.
It was like, are you into like dark humor that you saw in The Boys? Well, this is the book for you. And I feel like that is kind of tapping into that comic store experience of curating content.
Thank you. That was exactly the intent. And Space Masters has actually turned out to be a really big hit for us. It fills that void that Lobo left behind when he sort of vanished off the scene. But it's drawn by Derek Robertson, who everybody knows from The Boys, and it's a terrific book.
It's terrific fun.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you dig it.
Yeah, I actually wound up doing the review for Comic Watch for it, and I mean, I think I wound up giving it something like a 9.5, 9.8 out of 10 because it's just relentlessly fun.
Yeah, I mean, the basic, for those who don't know, the basic concept is the far future. The U.S. mail is actually the most important service in the universe, because you've got to get packages from some place to the other. So it becomes a deal where it's hella expensive to get your package from one side of the galaxy to the other, and the fee goes only to the person who actually delivers it, which means that you're trying to get your package from, as a courier from one side of the galaxy to the other. You're gonna have to run through a whole gamut of people who want to take that thing off your hands and take your head off and steal it from you. And every single package that moves to the universe is a hot potato, and it's a threat to your life. So it's a fun book. It's hysterical. It's grisly. It's dark, but it's a blast.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you're a fan of The Boys or more or less anything by Garth Ennis, it's a comic you should check out.
Yep.
One thing that you mentioned when you're talking about the Ignited verse was the common thread in that the books are sort of rooted in real world tragedies and real world issues that are important to now, and have a sense of immediacy to them, and a particular amount of social weight when you're addressing them. Do you feel like rooting those books in that sort of commitment and ideas kind of helps set you apart from the rest of the pack?
I think so.
There's so many independent publishers right now.
Right. And we wanted to run right up to it. I mean, again, the reason I took on the assignment of the Ignited book is because gun violence is something that I feel very, very, very strongly about, especially school shootings, and that I'm so angry about it every day. And so this is my chance to, work through have characters as proxies who are going to go out there, and they're teenagers. They're a bunch of teenagers. They don't all think the same, and some of them are assholes, frankly. And so they're not all going to have the most constructive solution to solve to approaching the problems of gun violence, and some they're going to have pretty blunt, almost terrorist-like solutions. But these are the kids who've lived through the trenches. I did a lot of reading, a lot of research from kids who have dealt with this sort of thing. And in the book itself, in the comic, we ran letters. We solicited and ran letters from people from, I say kids, but a lot of them are now 30, who went through gun violence in schools, who went through school shootings. And and put their experiences in the book and let them have a voice. I thought it was really important to do that.
Yeah.
And Omni tackling a lot of the same, not the same issues, but tackling racial discrimination, tackling a lot of white supremacy, tackling a lot of the problems that you see in the world today. And like I said, I think that's what appealed to me about this line of Ignited Comics is, win or lose, you're going to go out there and take on real problems and address things that you can't address if you're Marvel or DC, because they're big monolithic companies, and you got to be a little more, politically correct, and you got to be a little more, circumspect. But at Humanoids, they were just like, you got something to say? Go say it. Awesome.
That's really interesting, actually, considering how you had just mentioned how you were brought in to help bring it to the Western audience because you had such an extensive history with the market and you understand how to navigate a little bit more. And an issue with gun violence happens everywhere, but feels uniquely from the States because it's a culture issue, I think, that we're experiencing. And it seems like it's something that you have tapped into pretty heavily that we see at Humanoids. Is that part of the publishing decision to kind of tap into the sentiments of the Western audience, that things that the culture is dealing with at the time?
Yeah, I feel very strongly that as a creator, as a writer, an artist, whatever, if you're doing stories, that you have an obligation to say something, you can write just another Spider-Man punches Dr. Octopus story, and I've written them before and I'll write them again, and there's nothing wrong with them, but there needs to be room out there for people to actually, say things and bring themselves into the, bring their voice to the table. When I was growing up reading comics, that's the stuff I first responded to. It wasn't Roy Thomas and Stan Lee. It was Steve Englehart and Steve Gerber and Jim Starlin and the writers who were the first generation of Marvel writers who weren't trying to write like Stan, right? We're trying to write their own, something that was unique and sounded unique. And that has always appealed to me. I would rather read a flawed comic from an interesting voice than a technically perfect comic by, that reads like a bunch of other comics I've read.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, really. And it feels like Humanoids has set itself up as a publisher to be an open platform for a lot of these different stories. Because we can go from talking about Space Bastards, which is really raunchy and just a lot of fun, to something that's pretty heavy and dealing with heavy issues like Ignited. And even there's the new book of For Justice from Serge and Klarsfeld story that are the Nazi hunters. I mean, there's not a connected universe in a lot of these. Like, it's kind of on its own, but there's still a sense of a commitment to storytelling that is open to allowing these creators to tell their own stories. And do you find that's a difficult approach from the Western audience and being so open-ended and having that accessibility factor?
It's harder because it's harder to get visibility. I mean, it's just to getting back to what the public thinks of comics. Again, it's a large part of the public still thinks of comics as only superheroes. So it's hard to get on the radar. But with something like the For Justice, the story of the two most successful Nazi hunters in America, or in the world, I'm sorry. That's not the kind of thing that you cosplay has. So the fact that you could, I totally would. I would so, if we ever have conventions again, I would love to see somebody show up as the Klarsfelds.
Challenge accepted.
Yes, okay. But it's so. That's like I said, yes. I mean, you keep tapping into it. That's the beauty of Humanoids to me, is that we have another graphic novel coming out later this year called War Paint. I just finished reading the final draft, and it's sensational. And it's a YA book, and it's about a bunch of teenage girls who it's hard to explain, but basically it just deals with the stigma of women's menstruation and them fighting back against it as teenage kids and having a protest. And And it's really, and it's much, bigger and darker than that. But boy, it's such a moving story. And not many people would touch that kind of material. That's the other thing too. Really, the first thing we ask I ask two things when proposals come in. All right. The first one is, why is this a comic and not a TV show or a movie or a stage play or a novel? Because they all have different strengths, and it doesn't mean you can't make a good comic out of something that could also be one of those things. But the best comics are going to be the ones that are using the medium in a way that only the medium works, right? Using the tools of comics that you can't replicate in other media. The other question I ask is, would one of, I don't want to name names, but would this other company we use it, I don't want to name it, but we use it as an example. Would they publish this? Then no, because then if they publish, then a bunch of people would publish it. And I'm more interested in the stuff that would only be published by us. And again, win or lose, we may get out there. This may be a huge gamble. We may get out there and it just doesn't fly. We may get out there and a lot of these books just don't register or don't. But damn it, I'd rather fail that way than succeed by just doing Raina Telgemeier knockoffs.
Well, I was looking on the site. There's a link right there for submissions.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any other company out there operating right now with a flat out submissions link on their website. And then by contrast, you look at the list of creators and it's a substantial list.
Yeah.
And my God, it's like a who's who. Starting with Jodorowsky and Mobius and just,
and you don't even know the half of it yet. We've got so many things coming up in 2021 because, that's the other advantage of having me as a publisher is I got a lot of friends, and people will take my call. So called in quite a few favors, and we've got nothing we've announced yet, but we got some really killer talent coming up. So yeah, it's again, a good place to hang my hat.
Yeah. But it's not just the known knowns, but it's the new names that are all in there. For every Michael Lark I saw, there's 5 other people I've never heard of, but I'm interested in them because look at the company they're keeping.
Ibrahim Mustafa, the best example. He's doing a book called Count for us, which is a science fiction reimagining of the Count of Monte Cristo. And it's sensational. And it was so good that we signed him to a 3-book deal based on that.
Oh,
and
wow.
And he's got his next one coming up and he's working on it now. And it's sensational. And again, he's so good. I couldn't let this guy get away. So look, yeah, like you said, we got a submissions, thing there. It doesn't, it takes us a while to get through backlog, but
sure.
I'm always looking for the new talent. I'm always looking for the new voices. I'm always looking for something I've never seen before. And you don't have to draw like John Buscema to work for us. not that that's a bad thing, but I'm just saying, you can be off the beaten path. And if you can't, if you're not welcome at the majors because of the way the kind of stuff they put out, always eager to look.
Right. You don't have to be Gil Kane. You can come in. You can bring your Sienkiewicz energy.
Yeah, you can be Joe Sacco. You can be Marjorie Persepolis. I always fumble her name, and I am going to stop. So, but yeah.
Nick, go ahead.
So, what would you say is like the elevator pitch for somebody who's looking around at all these different publishers? Because there's so many right now, especially for indie comics. Outside of the big two, what is your elevator pitch for getting them to look at what Humanoids is doing and to check them out as a company?
We lean a little more into dangerous territory, which I like. We are our foundational word is transgressive. That's what we look for. We look for we feel that we publish transgressive material. We look for transgressive material, things that are pushing boundaries, whether they're violence or sexual or emotional or whatever. Just looking for things that are pushing boundaries. Transgressive is the word we live and die by there. So if you're into that, if you're looking for new experiences, if you're looking for comics that are not like the rest of the stuff you're seeing out there, then I encourage you to come, dip into our catalog.
And having said that, and everything that you've got going with Humanoids, you recently found time to dip your pinky toe back in over at DC, and has contributed a little bit of work recently. And if I'm wrong, but by my reckoning, it's been around a decade since you've written for them.
It's been about 12 years. Yep.
Yeah. How did that feel? I mean, was it like coming home in a sense? Or?
Oh, absolutely. It was amazing. It was, the day the regime changed up there, I got 3 different phone calls from 3 different editors before the morning was out, which was awesome. And I was welcome back home again. And it was terrific. And so, there was the Superman 8-pager that showed up in the last stories of the DC universe, which I was really happy with. And Francis Manapul killed it with the art. And, there's other stuff coming. There's other stuff I'm working on. We can't talk about anything now, but trust me, if you think I'm a good fit at DC, then you're going to be really happy in the next couple of years.
Oh, okay. But you pretty well made your name at DC, but you've worked for everybody. I mean,
everybody.
Spidey Brain Trust back at the beginning of Brand New Day. See, and forgive me if I get your title wrong, but I know you were editor-in-chief or something of that nature at Boom.
At Boom, yep.
I believe.
Yep.
God, what are there any major characters you haven't written at this point?
Let me that's the one question I get more than any, and let me answer that. No, there's not any. I get the question is always, well, what characters haven't you written that you want to write? Dude, there's nobody left. I mean, I've written them all. The only one at Marvel, the only ones that are standouts are Thor and Iron Man. And Iron Man has just been a case of me the streams haven't crossed the right time at any given point. Thor, I'm a science kid. I've always been a science kid. I was never interested in mythology or anything like that. And so I appreciate the character. I respect the character, but I don't think I have any Thor stories in me. So there's that in it. And at DC, I've written Batman in the Justice League. I've written Batman in Brave and Bold. I've written like a couple of one-offs, but I've never really had a chance to tell whatever, and I don't know what it is, but whatever my Batman story would be. So I think that's the answer there. I mean, clearly that's not the only thing I want to do, but that is the one character I really have never gotten a chance to do a deep dive into.
Right.
Right. That's pretty interesting. I'd like to kind of flip that on its head, because after talking about, I mean, there's such an extensive work with the big 2 from Kingdom Come to Fantastic Four. There's just so much. But at Humanoids, there's also a pretty wide depth already in your catalog, from the shared universe to standalone graphic novels. What would you like to do at Humanoids that we haven't seen so far? What does the future hold for that publisher?
There's a few things. A couple of years ago, I sold them on an autobiographical slice of a part of my life, a very important section, and it's just a matter of me getting off my ass and writing it. There's a biography of somebody else I'm looking forward to doing. There is a science fiction project that I've got cooking. So it's the idea when I came aboard was, you get me and you also get the creative part of me, and then administrative ate up as anybody who ever took a job as publisher or editor, it would tell you, suddenly the administrative becomes the most important thing. And so, a year has gone by and Fabrice Geyer, who owns the place, is like, well, where's my graphic novels? I'm like, dude, there's no time, so let's figure out a way for me to make time. So that's been the last few weeks, is trying to figure out how to, restructure the job a little bit, restructure the duties, so I can go back into and dive into the science fiction stuff and the biographical stuff and the autobiographical stuff.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
Thanks.
That diversification, diving into autobiography of all things, is that something you've longed to do for a while?
Autobiography scares me because I think that most people think their lives are more interesting than they really are. Nothing's sadder than reading the autobiography of a B-list Hollywood star who, spends the first 100 pages talking about their childhood like it's something special. I don't know about you, but I always just skip to the part where they get into show business. But I don't want to talk about it too much here, but there's a section of my childhood, nothing to do with comics, but a section to do with my childhood and learning some shocking truths about my my mother, my stepfather, that kind of up into my world, that I think actually make for a good story. The trick has always been getting back to the issue of, okay, why is it a comic? Could it be done better as a screenplay? Could it be done better as a short story? I don't know. So I'm not going to do it until I crack that code and work and find the right artist and find a way to do it where, okay, I see why you did it as a graphic novel. But I do want to stretch my wings. I've done, plenty of creator-owned stuff that's not superheroes over the years, but it does tend to get eclipsed by the stuff that people know. I mean, not many people know about Potter's Field. Not many people remember Empire. Not many people, remember, whatever else I've done over the years. But it's I've still got that stuff in me. And as much as I love writing superheroes and will always write superheroes, I need to remind people every once in a while that I can do more than that. I can write Archie. I can write mystery stories.
Strange Fruit.
Yeah, you can write Strange Fruit. Exactly.
Yeah. It's funny you should bring up Empire, just because I wanted to at least get a moment out there to tip my hat and just say thank you for delivering such you and Barry Kitson.
Yeah.
Just delivering something that was so fun and unique. And I remember when it came out, the Gorilla line, it just stood out as this really unique concept. And, then it went dormant for a while and eventually came back. But, man, if you're listening to this and you haven't checked out Empire, please do. It's about, it's basically about Doctor Doom-esque character conquering the world and then figuring out he has to keep the trains running on time, and he hates it.
Right. It's deadly serious and not so,
yes.
and that makes it sound funny, but no, that's true. I mean, it really is. It's a Shakespearean tragedy. It is, what if the biggest supervillain actually managed to take over the world? What happens the next day? Well, the Shakespearean part of it is, to me, is that the main character, Golgoth, the villain in question, had a 10-year plan to take over the world, and he did it. The problem was, about 8 years in, he realized he didn't want to do this, because he realized that what it meant on the other side, and all of the, suddenly, if you're the head gunslinger in town, that means everybody's coming after you.
Yep.
If you're in charge of the world, you've got to, as you say, keep the trains running on time.
It's constantly something.
Yeah, exactly. It's administrative. He can't be creative anymore. And so but it's dark. I mean, it's the darkest thing I ever wrote. And I'm pretty proud of it. Every once in a while, somebody will take an option out on it for a movie or something, and somebody will write a script. It'll suck. And then we'll let it go away, and somebody else will pick up on it. It's one of the things that you don't know about a lot of creator-owned stuff is that people make announcements all the time. Oh, this miniseries has got option to be a miniseries for Hulu or whatever, and that happens. And it's happening more and more, and that's always great. But for every one of those, there's like 6 or 7 that you're not announcing, just because Potter's Field has been an option for a couple of years from a different some heavy players, but I don't feel like announcing it until I feel like there's going to be something. I think otherwise it's just vaporware. So it's not a great revenue stream, because options are really cheap. It's really, if something gets made, that's when the money happens. But I think all of us working in comics have, who've been in here for a length of time, probably have 1 or 2 things that are, sort of being developed over on the side. The big disappointment was Irredeemable. The big disappointment was, if you'll remember, Adam McKay signed on to write and direct an Irredeemable movie, which was terrific news. This is 2 years ago, something like that. And then Fox bought Boom, and then Disney bought Fox, and they don't need superhero movies at Disney because they got Marvel. So the tragedy of that, the reason I bring it up, the tragedy of that is because Adam McKay wrote a script for the Irredeemable movie, and it was bang on perfect. I mean, he didn't change anything. He didn't put a robot dog in it just to put a robot dog. He didn't mess with a story, and it's the comic. I mean, I couldn't have been happier with that. So maybe someday that'll get made, but that's that big heartbreak of my most recent life is, damn it, Disney buying Boom and everything got swept out. So I don't know.
That is pretty heartbreaking. Maybe we can start a campaign here. Like we got to make that happen, right?
Look, if you can make the Snyder Cut happen, you can make the Snyder Cut happen. You can make an Adam McKay script happen. The script is written. It's awesome.
Okay. And I kind of want to follow up on that because I love that you talked about how Humanoids is always like, why is this a comic book?
Yeah.
That's what we love here at Comic Watch. We think the medium of comics is something that you can't find anywhere else, and that's what makes these books so special. But on the reverse side, a lot of what you see in comics now is IP generation for adaptations into TV and film.
Yeah.
And I know it's not a big revenue stream, but it's something that when it happens, it's hard to deny. And do you feel like that if an option happens for a Humanoids title, that the ability to translate from that comic book that's designed for a comic book medium will be able to do that just as an opportunity?
The good news about being an established company and having, the catalog that we've got and having the successes that we've had, because again, as I say, we look new over here and been a big deal for 30 years over in Europe and continue to be, is that we can pick and choose. We can be very picky and choosy about our partners, and we want people who are going to either do, emulate what we do or do it better, but not change things just to change it, and not just, like you said, just make a sloppy TV adaptation. We don't need the money. We don't need the quick cash. So we can be patient and play the waiting game there. So there's always people looking. We had a meeting today where we talked about the 6 or 7 things that are in various stages of development in Hollywood. And if one of them hits, that's awesome, but everybody's playing by our rules, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's always good. That's always somewhat of a complaint that you see in a lot of newer indie books, is that they were written for adaptation. You can always kind of tell.
And you can always tell. And I get it. I mean, it's a competitive as hell market now more than it ever was because of COVID. It's harder for smaller publishers, and you're never really going to make money in floppy comics. If you're going to make that money, it's going to be because somebody picked it up as an option, and comics are a great storyboard. But yeah, you can always smell it when it wasn't written to be when it's written to be a storyboard and a pitch. And I don't begrudge people at this point because times are tough and you got to do what you can do to get attention to your work. But yeah, I'm always, I don't think I know Brian Vaughan. I've known Brian Vaughan for 20 years, and I guarantee he didn't sit down with Saga and write page 1, panel 1, and go, okay, how do I make this something that TV executives will like? Just wrote the story,
And it's all the better for them.
Yes, indeed. So, have you ever had any aspirations yourself of making that journey into screenplays or anything like that?
Not really, because the opportunity has presented itself more than once, but I dig comics because it's very immediate. Basically what I write is what you see after an editor, goes over it. And generally the time I'm working with editors who are very simpatico with me, and I've learned a few things over the years, so I need to have a lot of heavy editing. So it's basically, I write it, you read it. But even if you're the head writer on a TV show, it's going to go through 16 different drafts, and 12 different people are going to have an opinion on it, and there's going to be a million rounds of notes, and you're lucky to get even half of what you really wanted to get out there. So I always said that the reason I didn't write a Justice League Unlimited cartoon is because the first time anybody ever said to me, well, I'm not sure Flash would do that, I'd be in jail for assault. So I didn't want to put myself in that position, or I didn't want to be in that place where, like, I know what a good Flash story is and have a million notes on it, and it comes out sort of weak and tepid. I like the fact that, not as many people are going to see it, but, what I write for Doctor Strange, that's what I wrote, and that's what you're going to read.
Yeah. I was just thinking, you brought the Flash up, so of course my brain had to go there. Is it odd for you, being the Wally West guy, to see Barry being the guy now? Back again, I guess.
I've made my peace with it. I mean, it's the sad thing about it is it just doesn't leave room for Wally anywhere.
As we've seen time and again.
Yeah, I mean, there's room for Jay Garrick because he's an older guy, and it's a different, it's a different origin, it's a different everything. But Wally and Barry are so closely tied that once Barry is back, there really is no place for Wally. I would have not the first clue as to what to do with Wally West if you shoved him back in my hands. I'd give him back because I don't know what you do with him. So that's at the same time, they're not my toys, and so you have to console yourself with the fact if you're a writer taking on a series that somebody else has already written, you've got to be emotionally prepared for the fact that when you leave, the next guy's going to drop a piano on everything you did. And because that's what happens most of the time. A lot of times it doesn't, but most of the time that happens. If you were able to put stuff out there that transcends that, like the Speed Force, for instance, if you come up with something that becomes a part of the mythology that sticks and outlives you, that's awesome. And that helps take the sting away from Wally's not out there anymore. Yeah, but some of the stuff I put in some of the time and energy I put into that universe still has a life beyond that, which feels good. Anytime somebody says the S stands for hope, I just break into a big grin. That's me. Awesome.
Well, I want you to take heart from the fact that there's an entire generation of fans out there that absolutely think of Wally as the Flash first, and that's down to you.
People, thank you. Well, thank you. It's also Bill Loebs and Jeff Johns. I mean, I'm not going to take all the credit, but he's a great character, and people forget that until Barry came back in 2006. It's been a while now, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Jesus. So it's been like 15 years. Wow. But up to that point, Wally had been Flash for like 3 years less than Barry was. Wally had appeared in more stories than Barry Allen ever did. So obviously to so many people, Wally was the Flash. And I don't know how to square that circle because the guy on TV is named Barry Allen, and so you gotta go with that.
Right. You've got a whole that's come around, and now you've got a whole nother generation that Barry's the guy.
Yeah.
So, and I don't want to gatekeep against that. My son, he's 20 years old. He's grown up with Barry.
Right.
Is what it is. But it's it's hard, as just a reader, it's like you said, it's hard to square the circle or however you phrase it. But we're running a little short on time, and I don't want to eat up much more of your evening. But it just a day or two ago, it occurred to me, my God, it is the 25th anniversary of Kingdom Come.
Damn right.
And I can plain as day remember buying those issues new. I've still got all 4 of them bagged and boarded and looking as close to the day I bought them as possible. But I mean, it's such a watershed comic for you and Alex Ross. And I just wondered if you had any retrospective thoughts on that you'd like to share, and possibly haven't shared 1,000 times elsewhere.
Well, only that, as proud as I am of it, as proud as Alex is of it, people should stop using it as a roadmap. It's a cautionary fable. It's not supposed to be the future of the DC universe. So every time I see somebody lean into that, I kind of wince and go, "That's not. No, this is a bad thing." But it's great that people are still riffing off that story. That's awesome. It's not my best work because I got 25 years better after that, but I'm still proud of what we did, and I think it holds up pretty well. I'm glad people dig it. I cannot give enough credit to Alex, because there is no book without Alex, and it's he was instrumental in here's some ideas, here's the very basic concept. What do we make of that together as writers? So I don't know. I'm just telling you stuff I've said before. But
hey, I get it, man. I get it. I couldn't let the opportunity to give you props pass by. So
I appreciate it.
Maybe that's my ego.
Did you ever read Elliot Maggins' novelization of the thing?
I didn't. I've heard it's quite good, though.
It's really good. I don't know if I'm sure there's used copies out there to be found, but Elliot wrote. I asked. They wanted to do a novelization. They wanted me to do it. I'm like, I don't know how to write a novel, and I don't want to have to learn in 3 months. So let's get Elliot, who wrote two of the best Superman stories I've ever written when he wrote those novels, Miracle Monday and Last Son of Krypton in the 70s. Do you know about these?
I am actually not familiar with those.
Holy smoke. Okay, so Elliot in the 1970s, Elliot wrote two Superman prose novels. One is called Last Son of Krypton. The second one, even better, is called Miracle Monday. They're recently back in print. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them at Elliot Magan's website, whatever the hell that is. And they are, to me, they are the definitive Superman to me.
Wow.
Those define who Superman and Lex Luthor are to me. And their Miracle Money in particular is is probably my favorite Superman story of all time.
Really? That's pretty high praise.
so I recommend it. Miracle Monday, which is the sequel, but you can read, I mean, they stand alone. You know, you can read one without reading the other. So I tapped Elliot to do the novelization of Kingdom Come, and boy, he just hit it out of the park. And there's just so much, I mean, he was able to put so much meat on the bones. There was so much. If you're going to do a novel, you can't, you only got 180 pages of comics. That's not going to be a novel.
Right.
So he was able to bring a lot more backstory to it and a lot more character and a lot more just stuff. And I highly recommend sitting down and reading that.
Outstanding. Well, as much as I appreciated you indulging me and looking back briefly, the bulk of this interview has been about humanoids and looking forward. And I can speak for Nick confidently and myself, I think, in saying that as a publisher, Humanoids is doing incredible things.
Thank you.
And really, really and truly bringing something special and unique to the industry. And I just, want to tip my hat to you for having the vision to go there.
Thank you. Well,
be that guy.
I've got a hell of a support staff. I mean, I'm not doing it on my own. I mean, that,
sure.
But
John Cassaday guy, he might do something.
But yeah, we're kicking ass.
Yes, indeed you are. Well, we're at the end of our time for this week, but Mark Waid, thank you so much for hanging out with us. And thank you everyone for listening. Go out there, support your local comic shops, read something, and be good to one another. Until next time, we remain the Comic Watchers.